The world is a strange planet, made of strange people, strange places, and strange events. These are the lists that expose the truth about the strangest things that happen here, on Earth, the strangest planet in the world. These are Miklists. A ghost ship, or phantom ship, is an operating vessel without a living crew aboard to operate it. There can be several reasons a standard ship becomes a ghost ship, from something as mundane as everyone on board simultaneously fell off and then could not get back on the boat and the boat sailed away, or the crew believes the ship to be sinking and so sets out on lifeboats, to supernatural events such as a jilted ex-lover is murdered by his attractive yet untrustworthy former sweetheart in order to gain access to sums of cash set aside for what was to be their wedding, so that she may sail the world in high fashion only to have the ghost of the jilted man board the ship that she is traveling on and murder everyone aboard in order to satisfy his growing bloodlust, echoes of which propel the unmanned ship to haunt the oceans for further decades, if not centuries, as it slowly ages and disintegrates into nothing. Other scenarios involved in creating ghost ships out of regular ships include sea monsters, attractive sirens on dangerous rocks, giant squid, whirlpools, the Ningen, sea serpents, Moby Dicks, alien abduction, the Sargasso Sea, the Bermuda Triangle, the Mariana Madre Hexagon, pirates, and more. But whatever causes them, the haunting visage of a ghost ship on the horizon is certain to turn almost any sailor into a dry-docked landlubber. 3 creepy tales of the most famous ghost ships still haunting the high seas. Number 3. The Flying Dutchman. The origins and legends related to the Flying Dutchman frequently change from telling to telling. Some believe the ship was always little more than a legend, while others say she was a real ship, doomed to sail forever without rest. According to maritime-based Wikipedias, the first print reference to the ship appears in travels in various parts of Europe, Asia, and Africa during a series of 30 years and upward, 1970, by John MacDonald. The weather was so stormy that the sailor... Oh, I am presuming John MacDonald spoke with the accent of a pirate, as he spent a lot of time aboard a ship in the ocean. And I want to do a pirate voice. The weather was so stormy that the sailors said they saw the Flying Dutchman. The common story is that this Dutchman came to the Cape in distress of weather and wanted to get into harbor but could not get a pilot to conduct her and was lost, and that ever since in very bad weather her vision appears. Yar, har, har. In his poem, written on passing Dead Man's Island in the Gulf of St. Lawrence late in the evening, September 1804, Thomas Moore writes of the vessel, "Fast gliding along, a gloomy bark, her sails are full, though the wind is still, and there blows not a breath her sails to fill." Even Prince George of Wales, who would later grow up to become King George V, would get in on the Flying Dutchman action while on a voyage with his elder brother, Prince Albert Victor of Wales. Either that or it was Prince Albert Victor himself, because when a log of the voyage was later published, the publishers apparently forgot to include which prince had done the logging. In either case, one prince or another wrote the following. July 11th. At 4 a.m., the Flying Dutchman crossed our bows. A strange red light, as of a phantom ship all aglow, in the midst of which light the masts, spars and sails of a brig 200 yards distant stood out in strong relief as she came up on the port bow, where also the officer of the watch from the bridge clearly saw her, as did the quarterdeck midshipman, who was sent forward at once to the forecastle. But on arriving, there was no vestige nor any sign whatever of any material ship was to be seen either near or right away to the horizon, the night being clear and the sea calm. 13 persons altogether saw her. At 10:45 a.m., the ordinary seaman who had this morning reported the Flying Dutchman fell from the fore-topmast crosstrees onto the top-gallant forecastle and was smashed to atoms. While skeptics have claimed that sightings of the Flying Dutchman can be chalked up to nothing more than superstition and a complex form of mirage called Fata Morgana, named after the Arthurian sorceress Morgan Le Fay, perhaps the most shocking revelation is that the King of England was measuring the distance between ships in yards and not the much-lauded metric system of measurements that we as Americans get rightly lambasted over for not using. Wait, when did England convert to the metric system? The 1960s? Really? Well, you learn something new every day. Number 2. The Mary Celeste. According to the third largest of the many maritime Wikipedias, the Mary Celeste is, quote, often erroneously referred to as Mary Celeste, unquote, in part thanks to a later work by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and that it, quote, was an American merchant brigantine discovered adrift and deserted in the Atlantic Ocean of the Azores Islands on December 4th, 1872, unquote. The Canadian brigantine Dea Gratia found her adrift under partial sail and missing her only lifeboat, and discovered the ship's log intact with a final entry dated 10 days earlier. There was no mention of trouble in the log, the ship still had ample provisions aboard, the cargo holds were unmolested, and none of the captain's or crew's belongings were missing. Adds the Wikipedia dramatically, none of those who had been on board were ever seen or heard from again. A decade later, in June of 1883, the Los Angeles Times retold the story of the Mary Celeste, but bafflingly included a whole bunch of stuff they just blatantly made up that added to the mystery involved. Every sail was set, the tiller was lashed fast, not a rope was out of place. The fire was burning in the galley. The dinner was standing untasted and scarcely cold, the log written up to the hour of her discovery. Yeah, none of that was true. Miklos is heard of and broadly uses creative liberties while creating his documentary content, but this seems a bit irresponsible, if you ask me. While there was initially suspicion of a crime having been committed, garnering the crew of the salvaging vessel quite a bit of suspicious side-eye, experts believe the crew likely abandoned ship hastily after an explosion in the hold that was caused by off-gassing from the stored cargo of denatured alcohol. But that explanation removes every ghost from the equation and is likely false because of this. Number 1. SS Orang Medan. Thanks to maritime reporting agency Wikipedia, we know the following about one of the creepiest ghost ships to have ever sailed the open ocean under a crew of dead men. The SS Orang Medan was a supposed ghost ship which, according to various sources, became a shipwreck in Dutch East Indies, modern Indonesia, in the Straits of Malacca waters, or elsewhere, after its entire crew had died under suspicious circumstances, either in 1940, 1947, or 1948, depending on the newspaper source. Most people agree that the story of the Orang Medan is an urban legend due to the fact that there was never records of a ship named the Orang Medan. I believe it can be agreed, Mahanahan, that we here at Miklists are not most people. According to the Wikipedia, new evidence found by the Skittish Library shows there were 1940 newspaper reports of the incident taken from the Associated Press in British newspapers, the Daily Mirror and the Yorkshire Evening Post. Before this was discovered, the earliest version was believed to have been published in 3 parts in February and March of 1948 in, oh boy, De Locomotief Samarrange Handels en Advertentieblad, a Dutch-Indonesian newspaper whose pronunciation is extremely unfair to me, so any Dutch Indonesians out there, don't at me. There were differences between the two stories, but upon reading it is abundantly clear that both reference the same events, real or imaginary, and even appear to come from the same source. Author Silvio Shirley of Trieste, Italy. Shirley claimed the ship's sole surviving crew member, an unnamed German sailor, had been, quote, found by an Italian missionary and natives on Taongi Atoll in the Marshall Islands, and before perishing shortly thereafter, had woven a harrowing yarn as to how he had ended up on the island. The German sailor told the Italian missionary told the Italian author, and the Italian author told the rest of the world. Or he tried to anyway, but the story didn't really catch on for another 8 years, as we've learned based on established chronology. So what was this frightful tale fraught with such woe? I shall read it now, directly from the Wikipedia. 2 American vessels navigating the Straits of Malacca, the city of Baltimore, and the Silver Star, among others passing by, picked up several distress messages from the nearby Dutch merchant ship Orang Medan. A radio operator aboard the troubled vessel sent the following message in Morse code. SOS from Orang Medan. We float. All officers, including the captain, dead in chart room and on the bridge. Probably whole of crew dead. A few confused dots and dashes of Morse code later, 2 words came through clearly. They were, I die. Then, after that chilling message, there was nothing more heard of. When the Silver Star crew eventually located and boarded the apparently undamaged Orang Madan in an attempt at a rescue, the ship was found littered with corpses, including the carcass of a dog, everywhere, with the dead bodies found sprawled on their backs, the frozen and allegedly badly frightened faces of the deceased upturned to the sun above with mouths gaping open and eyes staring straight ahead, with the corpses resembling horrible caricatures. No survivors were located and no visible signs of injury on the dead bodies were observed. Just as the ship was to be prepared for a tow by the Silver Star to a nearby port, a fire then suddenly broke out in the ship's No. 4 cargo hold, forcing the boarding party to hastily evacuate the doomed Dutch freighter, thus preventing any further investigations to be carried out. Soon after, the Orang Madan was witnessed exploding before finally sinking. While many experts agree that all of the above could and potentially are explained by a ship using a false name to illegally smuggle hazardous chemicals like potassium cyanide and nitroglycerin, the containers of which could have been easily compromised by leaking seawater, causing both the release of lethal noxious gases and an eventual ship explosion, other experts agree that basically the same thing could have happened to essentially any ship at the time due to a malfunctioning boiler, which could have flooded the ship with carbon monoxide and eventually exploded, sinking the ship. Unfortunately, both of these theories seem to remove most of the creepy factor from the story, and because the story is indeed, in fact, for certain creepy, it appears that both hypotheses may be rejected. Does the fact that the real Silver Star's logs fail to show any record of any similar rescue attempt prove that even the US military is afraid to put ghostly encounters down on record? Probably. Hello Mahanahan fans! As you may already be aware, the Miklists, Tech Talk Tuesday, the Paranormals, and Coffee Stained Media crews have taken on a larger scale project that may hinder or perturb our upload schedule. Please bear with us, and perhaps click the little bell-shaped alert notification button thingy so that you are immediately made aware of our most recent uploads as soon as they happen. Miklists staffers, now with included Emmy nomination. You think we're joking? Because it sounds like we're joking. But we are not joking. This is legitimate. I know, I was surprised as anybody.
Soon may the Miklos men come to bring us cryptids and ghosts and dumb. One day when the videos are done, we'll take our truth and go.